Additional practice questions to CBSE Class 10 Math. This is from the chapter A Pair of Linear Equations and Two Variables. What's the concept tested? These are what I would call as word problems. We've been given some information in words and sentences. We need to convert these into mathematical equations, solve those equations and find the answer. So it's essentially a two-step process. In the first step, we'll be framing a pair of linear equations. We are in that chapter. So when we convert these, we'll get a pair of linear equations in two variables. Solve those two equations to find the answer. Let's quickly read the question. In a class, if 10 students are made to sit in each bench, 10 do not have seats. Essentially, we are saying, let's say there are so many benches, we do not know how many are there. We're putting 10 students to each bench. In that case, we'll find that 10 students have not been seated. We could not find seats for them. Alternatively, if 15 students are made to sit in each bench, now we're getting 15 students to sit in each bench. One bench remains empty. So there are n number of benches. We find that one of the benches is remaining empty. How many students are there in the class and how many benches are in the class is what we need to find out. Let's get started. The first process is let's basically assign two variables. The first variable is for the number of benches in the class. Let that be equal to x. The second variable is the number of students in the class. Let that be equal to n. Let's start with the first statement. We'll frame an equation for it. If 10 students are made to sit in each bench, how many benches are there? There are a total of x benches. How many students per bench? We're getting 10 students to sit in each bench. So how many students are seated? 10x students are seated in the class. If we do this, we find that 10 students do not have seats. So how many students? No seats. 10 students have no seats. So how many students are there totally in the class? The number of students who have been seated plus the number of students for whom we have not been able to find seats. That should give us the total number of students in the class. So 10x, which is the number of students seated, plus 10 for whom we could not find seats, should give us the number of students, which is n. So let's call this as equation 1. This is an equation in two variables. Let's read the second statement. Let's look at a different arrangement right now. They're saying 15 students are made to sit in each bench. One bench remains empty. How many benches are there? There are x benches. If one bench is empty, one is empty, how many benches will be occupied? We'll have x minus 1 benches. There are 10 benches, 1 is empty, 9 will be occupied. There are x benches, 1 is empty, x minus 1 benches will be occupied. We'll have students will be occupied. Each bench, how many students are we seating right now? We are seating 15 students. X minus 1 benches are occupied. 15 students per bench. So 15 into x minus 1 students are seated. Have we covered all the students in the class? Obviously, we have one bench empty. We have seated all the students. So this 15 times x minus 1 will be equal to the number of students in the class. Let's just expand it and call it as equation 2. So 15x minus 15 is equal to n is equation number 2. So we have two equations in two variables, a pair of linear equations in two variables. Solve this to find the answer. Let's do that in this step. We're going to be solving these two equations. We said this is equation 2. We said this is equation 1. Let's subtract equation 1 from equation 2. Equation 2 is 15x minus 15 equals n. Equation 1 is 10x plus 10 equals n. Subtract the first equation from the second one. 15x minus 10x will leave us with 5x. N gets cancelled with n to leave us with a 0 on the right hand side. Minus 15 minus 10 is equal to minus 25. Take the 25 to the right hand side. 5x equals 25 or x equals 25 by 5, which is equal to 5. What is x? X is the number of benches. So you have found out one data. The second part is finding out the value of n, the number of students. Substitute x equals 5 in equation number 2. You can do it in equation 1 as well. So 15 times 5, x is equal to 5, minus 15 will give us the number of students. 15 times 5 is 75. 75 minus 15 is equal to 60. This is the number of students in the class. So we needed to find two things. How many students? 60 students. How many benches? 5 benches. Quickly summarize it in half a minute in a printed form. Assigning two variables, x for the number of benches, n for the number of students. Let's pick statement 1. 10 students are made to sit in the class. 10 do not have seats. How many benches do we have? We have x benches. How many students per bench? 10 students per bench. So how many students are seated? 10x are seated. How many do not find seats? 10 do not find seats. So if we add those who are seated and those for whom we have not been able to find the seats, we'll have the total number of students in the class. That's what equation 1 is. 10x plus 10 equals n. Second arrangement, we're seating 15 students in each bench. One bench remains empty. How many benches are there? X. How many are empty? 1. So how many are students seated in? X minus 1. How many per bench? 15 per bench. So how many students are we seating? 15 times x minus 1. Have we covered all students? Obviously yes, because we have one bench empty after seating them. So that should give us the total number of students. So 15x minus 15 equals n is equation 2. Solve the two equations. Subtract equation 1 from equation 2. You'll get the value of x to be equal to 5, which is the number of benches. Substitute x as 5 in one of the equations. Let's do it in equation 2. Get the value of n to be equal to 60. Number of students 60, number of benches 5. Before you leave, do two things. Sign up at online.maxtute.com and get started with your CBSE Class 10 Maths coaching. It takes all of 5 minutes and 3 steps to get started. Second thing I would like you to do is basically subscribe to this channel, youtube.com/maxtute, and spread the word among your friends and classmates.